My first deployment was down there to Panama, and I spent a lot of time in that region. I mean, if there was something bad happening, I usually was either in on it or we got there right after it. And it was a wild west type of an environment compared to what it is now.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We've got a special guest today, former Navy CEO from Trident Concepts, Jeff Gonzales. How's it going?
Going great, Dan. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. It's a little rainy outside, but, we're not quite under attack yet, so I'm still enjoying that, although that is coming soon, I think. So tell me about where you grew up.
I grew up not too far from here. Texas boy, Central Texas, born and raised. Count myself lucky to have had the childhood that I had.
What do you mean by that?
I was one of those kids that parents kicked you out of the house, locked the door, pointed to the garden hose, lights came on at night. That was dinner. If you missed it, you had to wait until breakfast. So I kind of bitched about it at the time, but looking back, realized how fortunate I actually was.
Yeah, I mean, a little self-reliance is not a bad thing, I suppose. Have you ever seen the show Arrested Development?
Yes.
We're raising a generation of Buster Blues right now. It's just like completely useless people. So what, Central Texas?
Yeah.
Austin or thereabouts?
In between, I was like out near Bernie.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Has it always been this hot? Because it's pretty fucking hot.
I get that a lot. I think maybe what's changed is the number of triple-digit days. It's always been hot here, but I feel like we've maybe racked up more of those triple digits in a row or at a time period in a season, if you will.
I don't really think it's all that bad. It's just, the energy grid here sucks. That's
without a doubt.
That's a problem, but other than that, I don't think it's that bad.
Don't get me started on that one. That is definitely, I mean, obviously you've been here, you've lived through like the last couple of chaotic weather-induced grid failures, and my biggest bitch is they know what to do to fix it, but they would rather not.
Yeah, there was let's see, what year is this? 13 years ago, there was a report done.
Yeah.
And funded then by the Texas State Legislature. It's easy to blame Democrats for all your problems when you live in Texas, I guess, but that they're not really in charge here.
That's true.
So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. At any rate, we're not here to talk about Texas politics. So what made you decide to join the Navy, I guess, is a good place to start.
Well, it wasn't necessarily the Navy at the time, and you got to go back to that time period. I was like, I graduated high school in '87, so around '86, the career counselors were big back then. You go there, do your testing, your aptitude test to see what career path they would suggest or encourage you to go down. And every one of mine were always having to deal with something outdoors or something. I joke about it, but I never got doctor, lawyer, any of the prestigious, if you will, job options. And I started to really think about the military about that point. And for me, what I wanted to do was it was at a period in my life where I wanted to test myself to see kind of what I could accomplish. I swam and played water polo in high school. And at the time, there wasn't really a lot of resources available for kids to learn about what options they had in the military. The recruiting office had a single pamphlet that was one-sided. It was two-sided. One side listed Naval Special Warfare. The other side was the actual hard hat divers. So I took a chance on the Navy because the reason why I chose the Navy was there was just so little information about it. Like there was hardly anything about what SEALs did. A little bit of stuff was starting to trickle out from Vietnam. There was maybe about a handful of books, and that was it. So I figured that since they were the least known, least advertised, if you will, that made it kind of perfect for me. Like I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to go at it. So that's what I did. I chose that. I was underage to legally enlist, so I had to do the delayed entry program. And when I did that, I had also been but my head coach for the water polo swim program there thought I would make a good pentathlete. And I didn't even know what a pentathlon was. So one day he takes me to the headquarters, which happened to be at Fort Sam Houston, and I got a chance to mingle with a bunch of these amazing athletes. And it just so happened that 2 active duty SEALs were stationed there training for the pentathlon. And I got a chance to meet them, and it was the first time I actually met this group that I was interested in, and it was an amazing experience that it was like something like this. They had 2 desks slammed together just like this in a military barrack style building. They were dressed up in I don't even remember what they had on, to be honest, but when they stood up to meet me, these guys were just like, I was like, that's it. That's what I want to do. I want to be just like those guys.
Okay. So this is before, by the way, just so you're talking about 86, 87, that time frame. Most of my Navy SEAL friends joined because of Charlie Sheen, right? Which is pretty funny. But that was 1990 when that movie came out, right? So you got in before that, and it also a lot of my other friends who were Rangers or in the Special Operations community or the 82nd Airborne, they joined because of Panama or something like that, or even lesser degree the Gulf War. But when Black Hawk Down happened, a lot of people joined up to that.
100%.
Battle of Mogadishu and shit, but. I think the only recent conflict we had was Grenada.
Yeah.
Right, 83. So you're coming in during a relative time of peace, but then stuff for the special operations community in the late 80s gets tuned up pretty quick.
Fast. I got by the time I got to the team area, so I joined the Navy, went to A school, went to Buds,
and you're an East Coast guy, right?
Yeah. I finished my naval career on the West Coast as a Buds instructor,
right.
But I did all my operating time on the East Coast. But when I got to the team area, things were starting to stir. The low intensity conflicts that we all participated in were those kind of like barroom brawls of the military. You kind of would get in and get out kind of thing. And I was very fortunate that my first deployment was to Panama. So
what were you doing in Panama? Was it anti-Noriega stuff, or was it down at Gulag doing at the School of the Americas? What were you doing?
So my SEAL Team 4 was stationed. So that was our forward operating base. Unit 8 was...
Because the Jungle Warfare School was down there, right?
Yeah. So SEAL Team, back in the day, for folks that don't know kind of like how the SEAL teams are organized, back then we were organized in AOs. So SEAL Team...
like Special Forces is now.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we had...
I didn't know that.
SEAL Team 4 had Central America, Central and South America. SEAL Team 2 had Northern Europe. SEAL Team 8 was Africa and parts of Africa. They shared that responsibility. So like each team had their own AO that they specialized in. So SEAL Team 4 specialized in jungle warfare, which was perfect for me because those were the legends, if you will, that I got to follow and learn from. But yeah, my first deployment was down there to Panama, and I spent a lot of time in that region. I mean, I think if there was something bad happening, I usually was either in on it or we got there right after it. And it was a wild west type of an environment compared to what it is now. Like, I mean, I guess now we've kind of circled back because you got the total destabilization of Venezuela, which when I was in Venezuela, you started to see the anti-American. Like, that was the first time I ever traveled someplace and saw American hatred for the first time.
The Soviet stuff runs deep there. Even to this day to some degree.
It's true. And there was again, if you put a little time and effort into studying a little bit of history and like who helped them to evolve to their status, you can kind of figure out a lot. So it was an interesting time period, that is for sure. I was very blessed and lucky and fortunate to get a chance to do so many really cool things, be a part of some historical things, and then unfortunately it was the first time. My first deployment was also the first time that I actually had to bury a teammate, so that was kind of not an interesting, but just something you don't really think about when you're young and
Sure,
full
yeah.
of it. You're just, 100 miles an hour with your hair on fire, and then all of a sudden you slow down long enough to bury somebody, and it's impacting.
Are the teams still set up that way, or is it how are they, I don't really know how they're organized.
So in anticipation of some of the shit that was going to happen, which we now look back and see it, one of the biggest problems that we had back then was, we were on our own. Like, it was nice to put up a con-op that said, hey, we'd love to have these assets come and support us, but we were always waiting and hoping that those assets would actually come and help us. So, we'd start with a air insert, then we'd start with a boat insert, then we would walk in because everybody bailed on us. So what ended up happening, and the other thing too is that I think Panama also shared this lesson learned, is that, the mission, we can debate whether or not the merits of the mission were up our alley, but what they ended up doing was they ended up putting together what became what we call a task unit. And the task units were basically multi-platoons put together to basically have enough bodies to manage just about anything that could be thrown our way. And that became the new era of the SEAL teams, what they called Task Unit 21.
And was there, like, you guys had slice out, you had support elements as well, you had breachers, you had fucking all this stuff?
So we
comms
were
guys, fire support, all that?
At that time, so that's the other thing. At that time, we were completely autonomous. So that's
rough, man.
Oh, it is.
Because a bunch of my buddies who are JTACs who have embedded with special forces teams are quite a bit more skilled than their echoes on comms. It's like
100%.
It's night and day. But not that the 18 Echo School is easy by any stretch of the imagination.
Yeah.
But you're talking about somebody who's really good at something, and then somebody who is excellent at something, which
totally different.
And then you map that onto 30, 40 years ago, and you guys are just out there fucking in the wind.
Oh, dude, it was, there was we were completely autonomous. And when I say that, if we wanted close air support, we would send our guys to close air support school. Then they would liaison with the close air assets, and then we would bring them in. But like you're saying, it's a part-time job for me.
Yeah.
Compared to having somebody that's their bread and butter.
Yeah, they eat and breathe that shit.
Exactly. And it was nice to commingle with these guys and get a little bit of insight into it. And it obviously helped to diversify our skill sets and create some new mission profiles for us. But again, the task unit, what made the task unit successful was it brought in a lot of other assets. So we had we had pretty much everything. Basically, a SEAL team now will get up and forward deploy as an entire team, including the commands. So all the command structure all the way down. Which then, because when we got in theater, a lot of times we'd have a platoon OIC, which might be an 03, that would have to go and sit in on meetings with like 06s. And it's kind of hard to sit there as an 03 and fight for things that you want or need with 06s. So now we deploy with an 06 who can sit at the table and say, yeah, that's not what we do. We do this.
That makes sense.
It makes total sense. And the now that the theater has changed, the war theater has changed, I'm not sure exactly what's going to happen. I know there were some complaints because in doing so, we lost some capabilities. By going into that kind of task unit configuration, we lost some capabilities. I don't know if you saw, I was reminded of this. Like I woke up the next day to a text message from a mutual friend, Tim Kennedy, where the dive contest, the Special Forces dive contest was, we lost.
Yeah.
And so I'm like,
that's kind of embarrassing.
It was embarrassing. When I showed up at Sheepdog, I was like, I walked in and everybody was like, hey, did you hear the news? I'm like, yes. Like I heard the news at 12 o'clock last night. So thanks. But yeah, so capabilities like that we lost. And, you tip your hat to the guys. I mean, it's not an easy thing. They worked hard for that. It's not like we lost it. It's that they earned it. And so now, when I look back at capabilities that we lost, such as that, what are we going to do now? What does the future hold? And I wish I had answers. I'm far enough removed from the community that I can bitch without worrying about trickle down weekend watch and shit like that. But at the same time, it's still my community. It's still something that I'm a part of. That's a part of me. And I want to see the very best for them and for our future as a community. So it's difficult.
We seem to have a big problem with both conventional and special operations forces fighting the last war we were in. You know what I
Meaning?
mean? Like when we were during the Iraq invasion, especially cruising around in soft top Humvees and shit like that. And then the tactics as well. Like it took us, it took a year or two to really learn like operating in the city. I think, you know what I mean? Like special operators had the good fortune of doing that before, right?
So
but
true.
I think especially 18th Airborne Corps, which is the 82nd, which is where I was, 101st, 3rd ID, 10th Mountain, like most of the infantry units in our military are in there. We didn't have enough expertise going house to house, I don't think. It just wasn't part of what we normally did, and then the special operations community had to cover down on that in a big way.
100%.
And then I think it really affected our ability to be light and kinetic with our special operations for a while.
I think that's a brilliant observation, because one of the things that tells us as a community and as a country is that we're slow to evolve.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like war will expedite that evolution, but it expedites that evolution at a greater cost of loss of life.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're, like we can sit back here and say things like, wow, well, like our lesson learned, that whole cycle of guys that were on the ground, like when IEDs became so prevalent, the information that was being funneled back and the SOPs that were being advanced and adopted, so that the next platoons that were going out had this information in their, in their playbook, if you will, was awesome. I mean, we went from like an 18th month cycle of something like that being actually adopted to 30 days.
Yeah, I mean,
or less.
Asymmetrical Warfare Group helped.
Yes.
A lot. I don't know actually when they came online. I think it was 04, 05.
It was it was well into the ground campaign in Afghanistan.
But we had, my unit when we were in Sadr City. We were there in 7 and 8 for the surge. We had an AWG element that was a couple of it was 2 Delta guys. It was a dev group guy and his commo guy.
Nice.
And then we had an FBI guy who was an expert on SSC, like search.
I love
right?
that, man.
I mean, that was it was a huge benefit for us to be able to have immediate, because we've got CALL, the Center for Army Lessons Learned, which is a repository. It's a library, right? But how many gunfighters are in the library?
Yeah.
Not enough,
Yeah.
frankly. Like you should, if you're out there and you're planning on being in the military and you're not a student of military history, then you're fucked up. Just to be clear. But the reality of the situation is there's not enough of that going on.
I couldn't agree with you more. Like they're also, the nice thing about what commands like that Asymmetrical Warfare Group did for us is they broke through barriers.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know it as well as I do that there was like this hoarding effect of keeping stuff close to the chest from our own, not even within our, I mean, I saw it even one platoon to another, and I suppose there's maybe an argument that can be made about some value in there. I don't know what that argument would look like or even what the value is, but what I do know is that not sharing that information on a broader level does only one thing, which is reduce our overall effectiveness.
Yeah.
And if we want to save lives, the only way to do that is by being better than what we are right now.
Yeah. Satterley talks about that from his time at the unit too.
Yeah.
Like A Squadron was more this way, B Squadron was more this way, C Squadron was a little bit of a hybrid.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then when he stood up D Squadron, it's like, all right, cool. We need to have all the best
of all of
these things. Why would we not do that? And it speaks to like how myopic the brass is in the military. They're risk averse and quite frankly stupid.
Well, there's a lot.
There are some good people like General Donahue. Love that dude. He does a lot to he can do what he can do in his billet, right? Which is controlled by the civilian leadership over the military and shit like that. But behind the scenes, he does a lot of stuff to make sure that his people are getting the right kind of training. But he's a rare breed, to be honest, man. And the only reason he's like that, he's the commander of corps right now. The reason he's like that is because he grew up in the unit.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Most officers just aren't going to get that experience.
Well, that's the thing that I was going to say. It's like, as a new frogman, when I got into my first platoon, I was very lucky. First couple of platoons, I had some great leadership. But I would almost say that my first 3 platoons, both the O's that we have were Mavericks, prior enlisted guys. And some of those guys had done some great stuff and were not just fresh off the boat. And the difference that I saw between that type of leadership and other leadership was a little frustrating. And so as those leaders continue to rise in the ranks and eventually get to more powerful positions, and powerful is not the right word, influential positions, they start to all of a sudden influence change down, which I've struggled with that. I mean, one of my let's just say less than stellar character traits is not having the ability to not meter what I'm going to say. And that periodically would get me in trouble because I would basically say things that I wasn't supposed to say because that's not what you were supposed to say.
Yeah.
There was some sort of unwritten law or rule that, no, you don't say stuff like that. You don't do that. And I'm like, why? Why are we doing it that way? Why? What's like my worst fear was that we were going to do something stupid because nobody was willing to question it.
Isn't that the story of lemmings? Lemmings are those little creatures that keep walking forward until they fall off the cliff. And they just do what the guy in front of them is doing because that's the way it's done. That's fucking stupid.
So that's exactly it. And so it's not like it's not like I didn't trust them, but I wanted to understand the why. If you can't give me the why we're going to do this, then we've got issues. And
well, if you don't give someone, like your job as a special operator is to be a force multiplier, right?
100%.
Like if you don't have the information, you cannot be a force multiplier. It doesn't work like that.
When I was growing up in that type of culture where it is a tip of the spear, and by tip of the spear, that means the decisions are made at the tip of the spear, not at the back. And what was embedded in me, what was kind of like forged in me, was my ability to make command level decisions right behind that trigger. And the only way that I could do that is by understanding what we're trying to accomplish. What's our goal? What's our mission? What is the commander's intent? And when that was first explained to me, it didn't make a lot of sense. And then eventually, as I started to, because obviously I was young and dumb, and I would watch a lot of people around me, and I would watch how they interpreted things, how they responded to things, what they did to prepare for things, and it started to make more sense. And like in this day and age, that is something that you see being adopted way more common in corporate America. The bottom-up approach versus a top-down approach.
Yeah. And we went from, I think the GWAT in some regards was a bit of an expediter for this. Necessity is the mother of invention. We went from shooting with our hand wrapped around the magazine well to our, to a forward grip, and then to, a grip with the thumb out over the course of 10 years, maybe?
Yeah.
Which is like, in military terms, that's
what
like,
I'm saying.
That's like traveling the entire universe.
That could be sometimes an entire career for somebody.
Yeah.
And it's frustrating because when you think about things, one of my charters that I would tell guys whenever I was sending them out to go to a school, listen, I don't care what they tell you to do, you do it. Whatever it is, we'll evaluate it and we'll make a decision. But your job is to take as much information as possible, bring it back, allow us as a collective to assess that and determine whether or not we want to implement it.
Right.
And it was hugely valuable because I don't care. Do whatever he tells you to do. If he tells you to do it, do it. Don't be a dick about it.
Yeah.
Learn. Open your mind and try to take as much information. And when we did that, all of a sudden, we figured out how to, because otherwise you're just a blunt force instrument.
That's the whole point of the train the trainer model, though.
It should be.
That was the whole point. Like we did. I went to squad designated marksman. That was the whole point of that, was for me as an NCO to fucking learn these skills to make me a better shooter and then come back and teach everybody. It's not a badge school. It's just somewhere you go learn some shit and come back, right? And if it fits your TTPs, it does.
Great.
Right? Like if you're We primarily did raids at night, and then we did patrols during the day a little bit, but we primarily did raids at night. So there's not that much use for a designated marksman, to be honest. But we still had better shooting skills, right, than we had before. And our guys that were up in turrets of Humvees and shit like that, who we were giving our fucking 21s to or whatever platform we were using at the time, or our guys back at the base, our sniper section back at the base, or out in town if we're trying to pop people putting in IEDs or mortar sites or something like that. They improve from all that stuff too.
100%.
It's a meritocracy ultimately, but you can't have a meritocracy unless you have all the information.
Well, that was the thing that bothered me the most, was when we started to selectively choose the information we wanted.
But what was the selection criteria, right? That's what always bothers me, because if somebody can't explain why, if the explanation is like you're talking to a child, like because I said so, like fuck no, we're not that's not gonna fly with me. I'll walk the fuck out of here.
It's so flash forward to my day, what I do right now, and my current profession. Basically, I'm an instructor, and I cannot tell you how many times you hear that. You hear, there's no stupid question comment from a lot of people. And I'm like, yeah, there are stupid questions out there, but it's how you choose to answer them that makes them stupid or not stupid. But
a stupid question is like, from my perspective, because I've done a lot of training as well, not just in, tactical shit, but thinking.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, what is this person trying to learn? The question is sometimes irrelevant. It's like, this isn't necessarily an answer to your question, but what you're trying to learn is this. And you can do that, right?
Totally. The other thing, too, that is very important as an instructor is that questions that you get asked are insight into the information, the message that you're transmitting, and how well it's being received or not received. If you're getting these questions, that should tell you that your message is not being received.
Right.
And
you
need to adjust.
Clarify
how,
a little bit.
Exactly. You need to adjust how that message is being. And that means that I'm going to say the same thing. I'm going to show you, tell you, walk you through how to do one task, but I'm going to have to show it, tell it, and walk through 5 different versions of it, because I got 5 different people that are learning 5 different styles, or have 5 different learning styles. And I think that was the big lesson that I learned in the military career when I transitioned into the instructor role while I was still on active duty. Yes, I need you to just go out and do something that's completely stupid and it's just to ensure that you are gritty enough to actually be here.
Right. Like, how many times are we going to shoot with iron sights in our life?
Yeah.
Not frequently, to be honest. These days, this is a bit back when you were in probably a lot more, but these days this is not going to, but you got to know.
Yeah, that's true. I laugh because the very first red sight that I used, red dot, if you can even call it that, was this monstrosity of the device. I'm not kidding you. It was probably about maybe a little bit thinner than this Topo Chico bottle. And I had to put it. I had to use it on an MP5. And
oh my god!
Oh yeah,
there's not even a rail on that goddamn thing.
We had to put. There's a special mount on the MP5. There's 2 claws on the top receiver, and there's a special. Only HK makes this mount. Nowadays, of course, nowadays you can get it for anything. But back then it was, and so trying to get one of those mounts was like, it's like, good lord. And I got one, and then I was mounting that. I don't even think it was called an aim point back then. I don't even remember what it was called, but it was just ginormous. But what's interesting was, even though the concept was far from complete, the idea of what this allowed us to do, which was to operate more effectively at night.
Right.
That was the key. Like, iron sights at night are tough. Not going to lie. They are tough. It can be done, and we did it for a long time.
But you're just pointing and shooting.
Exactly.
I mean, you may as well be shooting a handgun at that point, right?
It's a very tricky thing. This was a piece of technology that I recognized at that point in time, and I was like, okay, this thing sucks, but I love the idea.
Yeah.
Where are we going to see? What are we going to see? And to flash forward 30 years, well, maybe not 30 years, but 20-ish years, and it's crazy to see that.
Yeah, now we have red dot. I can't remember what the phrase for it is, but what's the red dot sight where it doesn't matter which way you're looking through it, it's always on target. You know what I mean? There's a name for it. I can't remember what it's called.
Well, the reflex sight is maybe what you're referencing, because like the very first time I actually saw a reflex sight in operation, I was actually down in Peru.
Parallax, that's it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So I was down in Peru, and we were working with our counterparts down there, and they had this South African drum gun, 40 mic drum gun.
Oh shit.
Oh fuck, dude. It was a
sounds
6
fun.
Oh, dude.
That's like Arnold Schwarzenegger in fucking T2, right? Isn't that
dude.
the one he had?
It might have been.
I think it was. Or no,
can't-
he may have had the HK version.
It might have been, but this was a South African model, and what it had was this the very first reflex sight, which was this fiber optic tube on the upper receiver. And we would swap, right? So on this side of the range, we had our team with the M203s and M79s, and over here we had this one dude that had this drum gun. And so we swapped, and I went over there and I started working with this guy. And they had building targets that were set at like 100 all the way out to like about 400 yards, and they had windows and doorways.
That's a good shot with a 40 mic, dude. That's a good shot.
It's an area weapon, so that's that's one
helps,
thing.
yeah, but put it through a window at that range,
exactly.
That's a lot.
Oh, dude, you talk about pain. And so we're over there shooting those M203s with the remember those leaf sights, and the M79s were actually pretty accurate. You could put some hate on with that M79, but it's a single breech loaded device.
Yeah. But a 203 mounted on the bottom of an M4 or M16 is bullshit.
It's just
like
it's close in. It's like I use them for close in work. That's all I used it for.
Yeah.
But what I was watching these guys from the other side. They were on the left flank. I'm on the right flank. I'm watching them. They're just fucking launching these rounds, these practice rounds through the doors, through the windows, through the windows at like the 100 to 150 yard targets, and through doors at like 200 plus. And I'm like trying to do, and now I'm getting pissed. I'm like, what the fuck? Why can't I do that? And when I went over there to see what this thing was, I mounted it up in my shoulder pocket, and I'm looking through it. And I back then I was shooting with my left eye closed. So I had my left eye closed, and the poor guy was trying to tell me in his broken English, two eye. And I was like, what does he mean by 2 eye? And then finally he explained it to me in Spanish, and I was like, I opened my eye, and when I opened both eyes, it was like, and dude, it was just like one after. It was almost like you couldn't miss.
Well, now there's the M320.
I don't think I've seen that.
It's the new HK version of the 203, right?
Ooh.
And it's you laze the target, and then it has green dots on top and bottom to tell you when you're aiming correct. It's fucking stupid now. Like if you miss with that one, then you're
in trouble.
Yeah,
man. I HE and me, I've got a lot of love for that HE.
Yeah, it's a problem solver.
It's such a problem solver. Even if you don't have a problem, it will solve whatever that problem would have been.
Yeah,
I love them.
So you were in the team's late 80s through the end of the I guess
99.
99. But you were an instructor for some of that, right?
Yeah, the last 3 years out there at Buds. It was interesting too because
I mean, you guys got a lot of work in the 90s. There's a lot of shit popopping off in Africa. Middle East, South America.
There was all sorts of crazy stuff happening. I mean,
shit, even Kosovo, Serbia.
for
Towards the end of the
sure,
day.
absolutely. And
which is about to pop off again.
Those were all things that were all not restricted, but we're all set up in that AO kind of configuration. So, things that were happening in Europe were SEAL Team 2s. Things that were happening down in Africa, that was SEAL Team 8. So SEAL Team 4, once the war on drugs, which was the big thing, narco-terrorism was the heyday thing, man. Once the shift in the war on drugs kind of started happening, and we went from narco-terrorists to Islamic terrorists, it didn't die down because shit was still crazy down there, but the focus for the community started to change, and you could start to see it at that point. And you started paying more and more attention to the terrorist activities that were happening.
Yeah, I mean, once Pablo got clipped in '93, it was pretty much all Middle East after that.
It was 100%. That almost was the end of an era right there, because
and then Bin Laden bombs the fucking World Trade Center basement that same year too, so I'm sure that had something to do with it.
Probably, but the other thing too, what I saw was we wanted an out. That was like the war on drugs was just not going to go down. It was it wasn't going to go the way we wanted it to go.
Yeah, drugs won.
They did,
and they'll always win. There's no way to beat that.
The way the strategy that we were using at the time, abstinence and prohibition, it's like. I don't know, man. I was all for it. I'll tell you right now, I was all for it. I was like, yeah, this is the way we need to do. Let's go. Let's fucking hunt these things down. I mean, dude, the shit that we burned and blew up and all that stuff down there didn't do shit. It was a drop.
You can't burn it fast enough. There's no way to.
And the problem that we ran into, and we saw this in Afghanistan, was with the with all the villagers in the remote parts of that region, their only way of making money is growing opium, growing poppy and selling it. And that's that, we wanted, and I remember when we first tried to go in there and try to change that. And like, did we not learn anything from Central and South America? Because this shit, if we want them as our allies, that's not how it works. That's not how this is going to work. We can't tell them to, hey, stop trying to feed your family. Yeah.
I mean, after the initial couple of years, maybe after the first year in both Iraq and Afghanistan, we to some lower degree, we were fighting actual terrorists, but it started to feel like we were just fighting criminals, like we were cops fighting criminals.
I know exactly what you're saying.
You know what I mean? It's like,
totally.
Well, and then you think, how much of this are we creating not by like taking, and especially in Afghanistan, these people have been growing and selling poppy for longer than our country has been a country.
For
you know
sure.
what I mean? So what are we thinking here exactly?
And the thing that I always had a problem with,
like, why didn't we buy it from them and manufacture our own Percocet instead of buying it from fucking China, for example? Like,
There's a good idea.
I'm not trying to armchair quarterback this shit, but there's fucking pretty simple solutions to some of this stuff.
I think that's the thing I value most about that statement is the simple fact that it is an out-of-the-box idea. And the problem that we had was there were certain people within the administration that stopped accepting or welcoming or even encouraging out-of-the-box thought processes. It had to be here. And part of that had to do, in my opinion, with the fact that, okay, we're in a full-fledged war. We've got certain things that we have to accomplish, certain check boxes that have to be checked now because it's no longer low intensity conflict. We're in an actual war.
Yeah.
Right. And the problem that I feel is that we forgot what it was like to be in a war, like a real war. And we had bad choices that we were making in the beginning, I thought, that were because we had forgotten what it's like to be in a war. That's not how, like, we win wars very simply by when diplomacy fails. The military leaders they should already have, and because they should be anticipating that diplomacy is going to fail, and they already have the plan laid out. The plan does not come from Congress.
Yeah, I certainly fucking hope not.
But that's what it seems like. Yeah. It seems like I want you to do this and do that, because the first time that I got exposure to political influence in a war theater was actually in Panama. The very first time that I'm throwing rounds downrange, right before, I'm not shitting you, minutes before we're being inserted, we were told that we could not use HE because they were worried about collateral damage with the associated, everything that was, because, that was an urban fight of sorts. So there was a lot of collateral damage potential. And rather than trust us to know that we can do our job well and that we were trained well to do our job, they just took HE off the table.
You're talking about 89, the invasion to unseat Noriega.
Yep.
Wow. Really?
AT4s, laws, 40 Mike, all that stuff off the table. And
this is on an airborne insert, right? Well, you guys were a boat insert, right?
We did for the airfield.
And
yes.
Then Rangers jumped in, 82nd jumped in, and I think some unit and special forces guys jumped in as well.
Maybe I don't remember that, but you guys we went in. So there's no reason that we couldn't bring that stuff.
Yeah. What happens if you run into something you got a demo? You're fucked. You just got to.
Well, so we could use there. There were, like, when we got there, and I, to be like my involvement in the entire invasion happened off the airfield, but I was there watching it all happen from my little perch where I was at. And I'm in a 2-man team, and they told us that we couldn't use any HE. I'm like, what am I going to use?
What if you run into an APC or something?
Well, the whole thing,
like,
the whole part where we were
technical, what the fuck?
My job was one of the reasons that I got a chance to do this was because I was one of the guys that actually had the close air support coverage, and I got lucky because while I was down there before the invasion kicked off, I did a lot of flights in Spectre to kind of become even more familiar with them. And one of my jobs was to recon a bridge that was part of a route that reinforcements would take to get to the airfield, and my job was to keep eyes on that. And sure as shit, they came, and our job was to call in Spectre and just have them nuke the bridge, and just that would mean that they would have to take another route that would give them like an hour, that would buy them an hour of time on target, as opposed to like maybe the 20 minutes that that route would take them. And and I'm like, I was just like, well, why don't we just have Spectre just take out all those vehicles? Just fucking
let them drive onto the bridge and then blow the goddamn bridge up.
All these rules, all these things changed in real time. And it was just like, it was baffling to me to understand, like, why are we doing that? Why? I mean, those are actual living bodies that were going to a target to presumably kill Americans.
Yeah.
Why not just waste them where they are? Why are we doing this over? You don't need me on the ground for that. You don't need me eyes on target for that. There's no reason for me to be there. Yet, so like
there were no civilians on the way to that fucking airstrip. No. I mean, if there were, they're fucking dummies.
On that route went right by the coastline. There was we basically inserted in via an indigenous craft, swam ashore, set up our OP overlooking the bridge on the airfield side, and waited. And I mean, there was nothing there. There was nothing
until the truck showed up.
Yeah, then it became a party.
Good Lord. Yeah, that seems kind of dumb. I know that the brass wanted some of the current military commanders to take charge when Noriega was arrested. So maybe they were trying not to piss too many people off with high casualties, but still, you don't put lives at risk like that.
That was my biggest concern.
Not when you don't let the enemy's QRF move freely.
Well, it's the way that you said it. We should not ever be making choices that put at risk American lives just because we're trying to extend some sort of courtesy. And that's what it seemed like to me.
Yeah.
And I paid close attention to that as I moved forward, and you could see that kind of insidious behavior. Kind of, I wouldn't say in every area, but you could see, and because I saw it, I could see it in peacetime as well, and the effects of what it would do. And I'm like, listen, this is my problem. This has always been my problem. Once diplomacy fails, you no longer have a say.
Yeah.
As the political arm, the bureaucrats, the diplomats, if they've done everything that they truly can to try to resolve the issue in a peaceful manner and they can't, then the point of military action is to be swift and decisive and relentless until the goals and objectives are achieved. And then as a diplomat, you can step back in and start your diplomatic process all over again.
Well, it's Mr. Miyagi, right? Don't fight, but if do fight, win.
Fuck.
Very, very
Unequivocally.
wise stuff. It's like you can tell us where and when, but you can't tell us how. We are the experts in turning this place into a manageable situation so you can come in and then do your job, right?
And even in today's world, we still see little remnants of that. You can start to see people. You'll start to see the politicians that don't have the stomach for war when they come out. And I'm like, hey, you know what? It's not like I do.
Yeah, it sucks,
but I understand
man.
it. I understand it, and I understand that if we don't take these steps, we run the risk of a much worse outcome.
Yeah.
And so, I get it. You don't like it. Fine. Nobody does. Show me somebody that actually likes it, other than other than the vendors and the manufacturers. But the point is that you can't do anything from your DC plot, other than wait until it's resolved. Yeah. Otherwise, just don't ever think, because I feel like what's happened is that the use of force has kind of lost its edge because we've watered it down through this hybrid kind of diplomatic process of continuing to stay involved politically through the warfighting aspects. And maybe there's never going to be a different outcome. Maybe we're at a point now where that's always going to be the case, where it's always going to be embedded, if you will. But
we're not diplomats.
No,
like
I mean,
we're the edge of the sword, man. You got to use us, sheath us, and then get back to business.
That's the whole point.
You can't do this stuff.
And what you hope for is that you hope that the results are so impacting that the future diplomatic relations are more effective because there is this historical perspective to draw on.
Yeah.
And we've lost that.
Well, we were lucky in Panama because we had a very clear mission. Right?
It is very clear.
And that's like the guardrails provided by having a clear mission, I think, will supersede or cover up some of these flaws that we have in our process. But, the GWAT, saying that the mission is to democratize one of these places or that it is to stabilize Baghdad, right? What the fuck does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, kill the enemy.
I'm sorry to interrupt you because that really rubs me the wrong way.
Yeah.
Because how are we even trained to do that?
Yeah.
I understand winning the hearts and minds. The SF's mission is a beautiful mission. It's a wonderful mission. It's been successful in many ways, shapes, or form. But it is in a very small. That is practical in a very small, controlled environment. Mm-hmm. A city or a country. That's not our job. That's not like. And the other thing I learned too is not everybody wants to be an American. Not everybody wants the American life, and good for them. That's great. You don't have to. I'm not. But the problem is, I feel like we are forcing it on people. Like Iraq was a perfect example. We forced that stabilization aspect, and I think maybe that's because some folks in D.C. did not have the stomach for what we were trying to do.
Yeah. And
they felt like this was a way to the olive branch. Well, we'll rebuild for you. We'll destroy everything, but we'll rebuild. So let us get in there and destroy everything. Kind of like hey, we're going to give it to you and we're going to put you in power after we leave.
Yeah, sure. And that doesn't make any sense unless you think of it from the perspective of the fact that these politicians in D.C. own stock in Raytheon, Boeing, General Dynamics, Lockheed Martin, and so on.
I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt. I really do, man. It's harder and harder these days, particularly when you start to see all that shady shit come into the surface. And it begs the question, how objective are they? How objective are they, and do they honestly have the best interests of American lives in mind? And one of the things that I remember, I got a chance to meet Colin Powell, and what struck me about him was his heartfelt concern for all the men and women in his charge. Mm-hmm. And how, knowing that he was sending some of them to their death.
Well, he had been there.
Exactly.
It's a difference, right?
Exactly.
He was a second lieutenant in Vietnam, which is fucked, right? Like, that's the worst thing ever.
Not much career stability there.
Yeah. Well, there's not much chance of staying alive either.
Exactly. But that was my point. It's like, I learned a lot by watching him as he advanced in the political circles. And I didn't always agree with things that he said or did. Mm. But what I believed was that he still believed in putting American lives first and making sure, knowing that these actions are going to cost the lives of Americans, knowing that it was worth it. Mm-hmm. And having a way to objectify that, like putting it on paper as to say, like, this is what it means to say that we won.
Yeah. And now we're getting involved in another one with Ukraine, and it's like, I don't think I'm a non-interventionist when it comes to the U.S. military at this point. Not that I would always be like that. I do trend pretty libertarian, so I don't like that base in its intrinsically. I'm not a fan of that, but I don't think we should have not gone to the European theater in World War II or to like right. We had different. We had to do something there certainly, but this one. These new interventions that we're involved in, we don't have any kind of, like, you can't use the military for diplomacy. It doesn't work that way. You can use it to win things and then be diplomatic off the strength of that win. but you can't send us in while you're being diplomatic. Like, diplomacy stops when we get deployed.
So
and it
true.
starts again when we win the conflict, right?
I mean, it's as old as time itself. You know, when you look at ancient warfare, you know, when diplomacy failed, troops were sent in, and they were sent in, and in some cases they were given instructions no quarter, for the simple reason that the politicians didn't want to have that conversation again. And whether that was right or wrong, they didn't have that conversation again. But when I see things happening right now, like Ukraine and our involvement, my first question is why? Why are we involved? How does that benefit U.S. interests? And I'm not questioning whether or not it should or shouldn't benefit U.S. interests. I want somebody to actually, in plain English, explain it to the American people. How does our involvement in Ukraine favor U.S. interests?
Yeah.
And don't give me this.
What you hear is the Russia is the boogeyman thing. Like, come on, they can't even beat Ukraine. Are you fucking kidding me, dude? Bro, we know this. We've known this about Russia since World War II. Good at information operations, good at spying, pretty decent at building weapons, bad at infantry. They're not good at fucking war, man. They still and you can see it right now live on television. They fight wars like it's the 1950s still.
That's a good point. It's like,
if Russia came after us, we would annihilate them in a second, right? So the only logical conclusion to that is some kind of nuclear conflict, which we're now stoking.
So, and I feel like exactly. I feel like Russia rode on the coattails of MAD. Yeah. You know, they were like, you know what? If we just put
it's mutually assured destruction for you guys out there in the audience.
Thank you. But they put all their chips on that card, and good for them, because I mean, look at how long the Cold War lasted, and their ability to live in their lifestyle the way that for as long as they did. But the problem with that is that they put all their money and all their great minds into the nuclear option, as opposed to how do we train our people to be war fighters for when like okay, so what if? And I think that's the difference between our mindset and their mindset is, you know, with the attack at Pearl Harbor, it became clear to us that we were vulnerable.
Yeah.
And that changed how we looked at things dramatically, and how we continue to look at things. You know, I don't want to tell people never to fear an invasion, but yet here we have one. We don't like to call it an invasion, but that's exactly what it is.
It just didn't look like the invasion we expected.
Exactly.
You know?
That's my point. And, you know, so if you define the outcome and you look for the patterns, you'll see it. And that's what I see right now with the immigration that we have right now. It's another form of an invasion. People don't like to hear that. I don't care. It doesn't matter if it's true. If it's true, then, you know, it doesn't matter whether you're liking it or not. Doesn't make it true or false.
Yeah. Yeah. And now... And I look, aside from all the reasons that we shouldn't be involved in the first place, we run into the same bullshit that we always do since the GWAT began, which is what exactly is the desired end state? Like, that's what you give to a military commander. You say, hey, these people are acting up. We need this end state.
Yeah.
Here you go. Figure out how to do it. Tell us what you need to get that done. I can't figure out what we're doing in Ukraine. Are we just going to keep funding the war until Ukraine is out of people? Because they've lost over 500,000 people already.
Oh, my God.
You know what I mean? Most of these people have no idea what they're doing. Not that they aren't brave and
it's totally different.
Good for them for fucking standing up and fighting for their country. I would do the same, but I've been trained to do that. You know what I mean? It's not the same thing.
So my biggest bitch is...
I feel like we're just feeding these people into a fucking wood chipper right now.
For
what reason? So it's like you ask somebody in fucking D.C., like, why are we doing this in Ukraine? They're like, oh, it's a strategic thing for the United States, and it's worth 500,000 Ukrainian lives. Really?
So here's a good way to look at that. All right, so let's take hindsight. I know hindsight sucks, but we have it to work with right now. 500,000 people have died as a result of what's happened over the last 2 years, however long it's been going on. Are you saying, had we not had any involvement whatsoever, that those 500,000 people wouldn't have died, or would that number be more? My point is that the threat, whatever that threat was that caused us to get involved, had this idea that we were saving the people, yet 500,000 people have died in this process. So clearly whatever we thought we were getting involved in didn't turn out the way we expected it. And my question is like when you get into this, you touched on it. Like, I want clearly definable objectives.
Yeah.
Tell me this. I want Congress says you need to wipe out their ability to wage war. Okay, great. From a military perspective, I can tell you what that means. That means I have to destroy this many tanks, this many APCs, this many aircraft, this many vessels. All right, I need to reduce the actual able-bodied, able-bodied arms to this amount, whatever
or
that
this
percentage
infrastructure
is.
or whatever.
Boom.
Right?
It's
Yeah.
easy.
Yeah.
At that point, it's super easy. And now we're also smart. We're also fighting a smarter war because now we can use our technology to fight that war for us.
We can also limit the loss of life even on the enemy side, right?
That's another part.
Like, well, what's the minimum? What's the least amount of people we've got to kill to make this work?
And
that should always be an objective.
And here's the thing: I don't expect that's going to resolve it in perpetuity. But what it's going to do is it's going to give generations peace, and then they will at some point, the factions will collect again, and they'll start beating their chests, and eventually they'll rise up, and it'll be you'll see the same thing. Everything's cyclical. And so what we did for them by taking that approach is that we gave them 2 or 3 generations of peace and prosperity without us having to actually get in there and teach them how to build things, teach them how to create a roadway or a wadi or whatever. None of that shit that we should be doing.
I don't think the non-warrior understands any of this shit, though. I don't think they can imagine shooters stopping and think about keeping body counts low, for example, because they just assume we hate the enemy. Like, that dude is on the other side. Fuck him. I want him to die.
Yeah.
Because that dude's doing his job like I'm doing my job.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I respect, I'll tell you this is not hyperbole. I respect my enemy quite a bit more than I respect any of these motherfuckers in Congress. You know what I mean? It's like, fuck off, dude. So
they are doing something.
Like, they're going to fight the war in a way that, 1, makes them look good, and 2, fucking gets their buddies and the MIC paid, right? That's what they're going to do. You and I are going to fight the war to make sure that there's the least amount of risk to our people and the least amount of death on the other side. That's how we'll conduct that war.
And the thing about that type of mindset that you see lacking in DC is because I believe there's 2 things. I believe that there's clearly an argument that can be made for the all of the defense contracts and all that stuff. You can't not make an argument for that. It has to be there. But then I think the other problem is that those types of people that would have a say, have a voice in how we wage war, goes back to something we said earlier. They don't understand violence. They don't have the capacity to appreciate what violence really means. So
that's why they couldn't understand people in the Middle East.
Exactly.
They were like, oh, we'll fucking high five them and they'll go on about their business. Like, no, you've got to slap them, actually. I know it doesn't feel right to you, but you've got to walk up to this man and humiliate him, emasculate him in front of all the other men, just like a lion fights the pride leader and takes over the pride.
Yeah.
I know that it sucks and it seems very bizarre to you, but that's how it fucking works.
And the difference is that you have to know, it's not necessarily just knowing your enemy. You have to know how they ask these people that are involved in voting for war, voting for us to go into a conflict, and ask them if they actually understand the culture that we're going to. Do they understand what it means to do this? Do they understand that we can't just use the same playbook that we've been using for the last 50 years and expect to see a different outcome, right? So my biggest problem, and I think we're starting to see a somewhat of a change in some of the political circles. You're seeing more veterans advancing and being elected into positions and political positions, which I think is, as much as people don't like the idea, oh, he's a warrior. Well, you know what? It's probably pretty nice to have that perspective that can give or share insight that you lack. Wouldn't you want to have that information, all available information, before you pass some sort of or a vote on whether or not to send American lives to their death?
Well, at NASA, they have astronauts and they have engineers.
Yeah.
And the astronauts do not tell the engineers what to do, ever.
Yeah.
Right? They give them feedback like, hey, this is more practical for what we're trying to do, and then the engineers tell them if that's possible or not.
Yeah.
But that is a two-way street from both directions.
It's a great model.
You know what I mean? Like that's the only way that something hyper dangerous can ever be efficient.
It's too bad that, right now, having a member, a political position filled with a veteran has got such a negative stereotype written over it. It really is, because I feel like the biggest value that having particularly a combat veteran in office is he understands what's at stake. And if he feels there's an other option available, he's going to pursue that. He or she will pursue that.
It's not just numbers on a piece of paper.
Exactly.
That's your buddy that died.
Exactly.
You know what I mean?
They understand it, and they're willing to exhaust every diplomatic option available.
Yeah.
But they also understand that when there's no more diplomacy available, hey, I need to step back and let the boys do what they know how to do.
Yeah. And what you know how to do is train, and that's what you do now. Tell me about Trident.
Yeah. So Trident Concepts has been around for about 20 plus years. We are a nationally recognized training company. Do the standard gamut of specialized weapons and tactics type stuff. We do it for both military, law enforcement, and within the last probably 8 years, the private citizenry has been very, very interested. And I would say even in the last couple years, since the pandemic, we've seen the private citizens, the new gun owners just take to the range. And it's a really, and I know that you can appreciate this, because what we're seeing people that are actually exercising their constitutional rights.
Yeah.
They're actually, it may have been just like a conversation they have at a dinner party. Oh yeah, Second Amendment, blah, blah, blah. But now they're actually acting upon that. They're actually moving in a direction where they can, and I honestly have a lot more respect for a lot of them now these days, because now they've become invested in it.
Yeah.
Because before it was just a nebulous concept. Now it's more real. It's more visceral to them.
Yeah.
And they have become some of the best role models and ambassadors and even recruiters for us. This new generation, if you will.
Yeah, one of my buddies, Maj Tori, is like that. He runs Black Guns Matter. I don't know
Yeah,
if you're
yeah,
familiar with that guy. Yeah, he's responsible for more black people in America turning to the two-way than anybody, I think, probably. Right?
I met him a couple years ago and watched him grow, and the work that he's done, hugely valuable.
Yeah.
And the thing I tell people is like, it's the old saying, I'd rather be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yeah.
And train people, let them make their own minds up, because what you find a lot of times is that if you can provide the training and education to allow them to make decisions on their own, they're way more informed decisions. Now they're choosing a better outcome and a better pathway for them and their families,
right, yeah.
which is so important these days. And we saw this particularly here in Texas, in Austin. When there was an indoor range not too far from here, South Austin on I-35, called the Range at Austin. And when that first opened up, I was the director of training there. It was great because it was like 10 minutes from downtown. So we saw a lot of people that didn't fit the stereotype for the traditional 2A supporter.
Yeah.
And, when Governor Perry left office, one of the things that he did was he raped California of the tech industry. He made them offers they couldn't refuse to relocate here to Texas, especially in Central Texas. And so we saw a lot of those tech companies relocate here, and they brought, obviously, their employees, and many of those employees have the same mindset that they had in California here, but many of them don't. Many of them have actually changed when they've gotten a feel or a sense of what real freedom is. And, I'm not saying Texas is a perfect state, but it's certainly better than California.
Yeah.
And so when they all of a sudden start to see these freedoms, these liberties that they actually get to embrace and to actually believe in, they have turned into some of the most vocal 2A supporters. And it's not surprising, because, for however long they were force-fed a narrative that we both know is completely false.
Yeah, it's bullshit.
It's total bullshit. And so all of a sudden, a lot of them are still a little upset by that. But many of them, they're middle-aged, highly educated, successful, adult children. And so they are smart enough now to actually say, wait a minute, all that shit that you just gave me was bullshit.
Yeah.
I don't believe any of that anymore, and I'm going to do what's right for me and my family.
Yeah.
And we saw, I mean, this is also, I got a chance to see the woke culture at work, because many of them obviously work in an environment that is not 2A friendly. And they did everything they could to keep that under wraps. Like they couldn't share the fact they went to the range, they got their LTC, they bought their first gun with anybody. They were like the perfect closet 2A supporter.
Yeah.
Until finally, you throw a pandemic, you defund the police, you have violent riots in our cities, and people start to change their perspectives.
Yeah. Well, liberty is it's a muscle, right?
Oh, I like that.
It'll atrophy. That's why Reagan said that liberty is always one generation away from extinction. You know what I mean?
I've never thought of liberty like a muscle.
Yeah.
That is a perfect analogy.
If you don't use it, it goes away, man.
God, I love that. That is huge. I love that.
And you just on that topic, you wrote, just providing value to the community. I guess you wrote the Concealed Carry Manual, which is one of the go-to books on the subject. It was
a huge. Fortunately for me, I got a chance to do a lot of low-vis work, both on active duty and after that. And the concealed carry market is a perfect fit for that type of experience. So I was able to digest that all at a point in time, because what I saw so many of these new gun owners wanting to get their license to carry, wanting to carry concealed, but there not really being a lot of resources available for them.
There's a lot of bad resources on fucking YouTube and shit like that. A lot of knuckleheads.
That's very true. And I would tell people that as well. It's like, I get, this is the modern medium that you're learning from, but I still believe in the power of the written word, and I love writing. And the book was, basically a condensed version of my experience in a way that the new gun owner, somebody new to concealed carry, could actually value, like tooth to tail, gave them everything.
Understanding the mechanics of it, especially the difference between if I'm printing out in public right now, there's not that big of a problem with it. But if you're in a non-permissive environment, you know what I mean, and you train to the highest possible standard, right? So trained. If you're a new gun owner, honestly, I recommend putting dummy rounds in it and carrying it around every second of your life for about a month or two before you ever put ammo in that goddamn thing. But certainly training to the standard of being in a non-permissive environment, because you don't know if somebody's going to walk up behind you and snatch that gun out of it. If you're carrying a dangerous weapon in public and you don't have the ability to retain it, then you may as well just go hand a gun to a fucking criminal. You know what I mean?
So a lot of times I get the question, like, what's your stance on open carry versus concealed carry? And my it's the same. I support your right and decision to do that. I don't agree with it.
Yeah.
Because of the things that you just said.
It's a tactical disadvantage.
It's
for sure.
huge. You're giving up one of the main elements that you have at your disposal, which is surprise. Huge thing. And I try to get people, what camp do you fall into? Why do you want to open carry? Do you fall into the camp that is trying to, promote the Second Amendment, and this is your way of protesting in a peaceful manner? Okay, great. But just realize that you're still putting yourself at risk. If you're going to do that, that's great to do it, maybe at the stair steps of the Capitol when it's an active, involved kind of organized kind of process. But to do it just every day.
Yeah, it's weird to me.
You start to see the diminished returns on your investment at that point. First of all, you're not convincing anybody out in the streets that they're going to all of a sudden decide to be a 2A supporter. But what you do is you put yourself at a higher risk of an altercation. I watched a video literally this morning before I came here of a poor guy that had his firearm taken off of him at a gas station, inside paying for gas. And it happens so fast. So my caution to people, if you're coming into the market, and the other thing too I want to make sure that I address is the mindset. If you're carrying the firearm on your hip because you're hoping that it's going to ward off evil, that's not how it works. Unfortunately, what you're actually doing is you're attracting evil, because for a criminal to obtain a firearm, if they're a criminal, they can't legally purchase a firearm. So the only way for them to get it is to steal it. And they're going to steal it from home invasions, car break-ins, or on body. It's become super popular because, believe it or not, it's easy to do it. It really is. So I discourage new gun owners from moving into the open carry market. I mean, there's a time and a place for it, like sure, you're going to, whatever, you're going to and from the range. Okay, fine, whatever. You're on your property, you're hunting. Okay, fine, sure, whatever. But as a default setting for your everyday life, I just feel like you give up too much. That surprise element is just way too valuable to just throw away.
I mean, think about it from the point of view of the criminal. Let's say you're in a store and the store is getting robbed. Yeah. You're getting shot first, dude. Or like you don't have the ability. If you get surprised by this human being at all, you're dead.
The other thing I tell people is that, okay, so the worst case is that you get shot and killed because you had an open carry gun. But less worse, you don't die, is that now you're the attention of the criminal. And you've lost any opportunity for you, unless you have like a master class draw speed, you're not going to outdraw a gun. No. That's already pointed at you.
The most common use of a concealed weapon, by the way, is in defense of a third party. Yeah. Like almost, I think it's 67%, something like that.
It's a very high number.
It's a super high number.
And that's the point is that becomes a possibility because the criminal enterprise did not observe you with a firearm. If they had observed you with a firearm, you probably would have been the subject of the crime. So you have to kind of keep things in perspective. So boys and girls, if you're new to carrying concealed, it's your right to open carry, but you should think it through and really weigh the pros and cons before you do it. Yeah,
I agree 100%. Before we get out of here, tell me about the podcast.
So we started a podcast probably a year and a half ago. Bulletproof Workshop is what it's called. And my intention with that was to talk with successful people, not about their success, but about their failures, about their lessons learned, about the challenges that they faced, and more importantly, how did they overcome that? Like what little tips can they share with the audience about overcoming these types of obstacles to becoming successful? Because that's what we all want. We want to be successful in some way, shape, or form. It's defined differently for everyone, but there's a model, and I've noticed trends and patterns emerge from all these, because we've talked to people from all different walks of life, different professions, different, not everybody's come from the 2A. In fact, I would say more than half of them don't come from the 2A community, and it's really valuable for me to sit there and talk to somebody and how did you overcome these challenges? I'm still learning. I'm still trying to figure out myself in this lifetime, and I don't have all the answers. So, and one of the things that I try to do, and it's a tip of the hat towards the poem, which is to beautify my life. And I feel that the way that I can do that is by learning to do things better. Like whatever it is that I'm doing, how can I do it better? Yeah. And when I see somebody that's successful, that's doing it better, I want to learn from them. I want to figure out, how did they do it? What can I do to help, improve my, my ability to do that? And so it's been a lot of fun. I did not expect to like it as much as I did. I've been a guest on many shows, but to sit in your seat and be the actual host, I didn't think I was going to like it as much as I actually did.
It's a little bit, I mean, I enjoy it just because I get to learn stuff. Yeah. It's I've talked to like Nobel Prize winners, for example. We've had Oscar winners on the shows.
Wow.
It's like, it's pretty sweet. Yeah. Not gonna lie.
And that's the thing. It's like, somebody like yourself and myself, the insatiable appetite for knowledge and learning and perfecting ourselves is something that I don't ever see going away.
No, it'll never go away. That's why we'll keep doing this. Yeah. Because, I mean, I think it provides value too, but it's not, this isn't all, self-sacrifice here. Yeah. I get a lot out of this.
That's what I would say that I get more out of it. I shouldn't say it this way, but it's kind of how I look at it. I do this selfishly because I want to get better.
Well, hopefully we got a little better today.
Oh, hell yeah.
Hopefully you guys will get a little
Liberty
better.
as a muscle, man. Yeah, I fucking love that. Yeah. That is going on. I'm taking that for sure.
Yeah, take it. Everything I say is free. Look, thanks for coming today, man. I appreciate
My pleasure,
it.
brother.
Yeah, and thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.